Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first face-to-face event for the year. In fact, probably for about 12 months. Some of you might have been with us last year when we held Australian Retail Innovators. So we're back with State of the Nation 18. So this is an event that we actually started running at the beginning of the pandemic. Obviously started as a virtual event, and today we've got in-person and we've got virtual as well. So we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to take us through the State of the Nation, what's happening in retail. We're also going to talk a little bit about the future of customers, what are the customer trends that we're seeing at the moment. And then we're really pleased to welcome Ian Bailey, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Kmart journey and everything else that's going on in retail. Fantastic. So just a couple of housekeeping rules. Toilets are out the door. If you do need to exit through the door and up the stairs to get out the Kirribilli Club, we do understand if you have to dash off and meetings and things, so that's no issues at all. And just thank you for everyone for joining us this morning. It's fantastic. So my name's Anastasia Lloyd-Wallis. I head up the Insights Division and I'm Chief Operating Officer of Retail Doctor Group. And you will hear me talk a little bit more later. And I'd like to pass over to Brian Walker, CEO.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So there's a click in here.
It's stopped working, so.
Okay. All right. Well, it's amazing to be back in front of an audience. So thank you for doing what you're doing and coming to join us. I'm going to try and spend about 10 minutes talking about this year called 2030, the future of retail. And it's virtually impossible in 10 minutes to cover it. So I'm just going to try and pick up a couple of themes. And some of the things that we're seeing working with clients, that we're seeing in the sector, and then over to Anastasia, who'll talk about what we see from a consumer point of view, and particularly around this change. You know, big slide to start us off, but of course, we're in the fourth industrial revolution, or really the technical revolution now, and we're all very familiar with cloud computing. The influence now, we've only got to look at the capital raises of tech companies to see the effect of digital on the landscape. But of course, for all society, we're seeing changes in physical, biological, and there's all the things that are coming downstream: autonomous vehicles, advanced robotics, new materials, 3D printing, and so forth, all the way through to genetic engineering. In years to come, your children will be able to engineer their perfect partner. It won't be so much by chance. And I don't know what that means or what it brings, but it's change. So we're seeing all these sort of changes occurring. And really, I want to spend a brief time talking about some retailer adaptation. I think I haven't got a clicker, so I think I'm going to do it this way. So we see 9 chapters for the future. I'm going to go through this, but only cover a few of them today. This thing called shopping at the edge. We grew up with the physical store as the destination. We grew up with shopping at the center of activity. Now what we see increasingly is something called shopping at the edge, which I'll touch on. But imagine the physical environment as the center of the ecosystem. Consumers are doing business with us well before they get to that environment, and well after they leave that environment. So what's the role of that as it develops? The intersection of technology, media, and retail. We've only got to look at the Amazonian model, the growth of prime television, TV, the streaming services, the growth of Netflix. This idea that media plays such a powerful role increasingly in a much more direct and personal way. 1 out of every 2 United States residents is a Prime subscriber to Amazon. We are currently at around 24 to 26% subscription to Prime. And Prime brings itself into our life. And when it brings itself into our life, we are exchanging data with them all the time. The data sets are remarkable. Data is everything, the future of the ecosystem. Of course, blockchain, cryptocurrency, data, and we'll touch a little bit on the metaverse and the alternate currencies developing. But will soon become the parallel universe. Right now, metaverse looks like a gaming show, but when you look at Zuckerberg and the investment made, you see that there's something in this. The rise of the machines, robotics have been with us for a few years. AI will drive that to another level. What's my reality? Mixed realities, virtual reality, augmented reality. And of course, as I touched on, the metaverse. So we're starting to see this retail ecosystem contain not just the physical environment, but this integration of an augmented reality. We'll hear the term omnichannel for a few more years, and then of course it'll blend into its retail. It's just retail. And so whilst we use it a little bit today, we'll think much more about this idea of the ecosystem, which brings us to the point of the rebirth. And I'm not sure I agree with this, the rebirth of physical retail, the integration of physical retail. What will our shop stand for in the future? By 2030, will it just be racks of product? Will it just be the classic category management, aisle assortment, sales per square meter metrics? Or will it be the consummation point for the curated experience? And what will that mean from a capital investment? So right now, landlords are wrestling with 5-year terms, 3-year terms. You're all in the coalface dealing with that. You're all thinking of business cases around what's the capital injection needed? What's my classic ROI business case? All starting to change very dramatically and transforming. For those who know us, neuroscience, the study of the brain, the study of the drivers, right from Martin Lindstrom's work through to the future, understanding the human brain and understanding its motivations, behaviors, drivers, the systems of the brain is critical for retail. And one of the pieces that will come from that is organizations will evolve. We'll have data scientists on board. There's a study that shows us from Gartner that one of the great new occupations for retailers, and they're going to increase by 75%, is to bring on board data scientists, behavioral scientists. Okay? And of course, social consciousness. Social consciousness driven by millennials, but effectively influencing at a much higher rate social awareness and consumption patterns. There's a lot on the plate for a retailer to think about as a leader. And it's the integration and the synchronization of these points that bring us to the future. So shopping at the edge, well, it's really where consumers start and look to complete their shopping journey. Think of it as you're usually outside a brand or a retailer's physical environment and even digital space. We're seeing much more use of messaging apps, social media, live streaming. So discovery at the edge. And so when you think about your retail business, how do your consumers first get in touch with you? And you'll find it's increasingly less traditional. Buying at the edge, mobile wallets, email, social media, they're increasingly becoming higher destinations for shoppers to increasingly transact. So we went from e-commerce through mobile commerce through into social commerce. And there's actually a very strong view that things like the iPhone will disappear by 2030 because we'll have integrated technology, 5G networks advancing, and this content will be available in a range of ways for us as customers. Service at the edge, self-service channels, bots, and so forth. So what's one of the issues that retailers face? And I think Ian will be kind enough to talk about this. We've got to a point in our journey where we all have a lot of legacy point-of-sale systems and information systems. And so, you know, the classic thing only a few years ago was, of course, the inventory merchandise central hub, running out to a whole lot of point of sales, a link to sales, a link to accounts, and that was nirvana. But now we look at things and talk about the unified customer platform. The unified customer platform to deliver a connected customer experience. So as customers move with more agility, more speed, more decision-making, and frankly, more promiscuity across brands and across touch points, how do you capture them? And how do you as a retailer build your village, your loyalists, your followers, and how do you know them with even greater elasticity and precision than we did before? And so the term community becomes one of the buzz terms, if you like. How do we increase agility of information, mobility? How do we create a seamless customer experience across channels and devices? How do we increase our store-associated productivity in a way that's meaningful to data, to customer visitation, not so much even on a transactional basis, but a customer interface? What are they sharing with us? What are we gaining? How's it developing our business? How are we making data-driven decisions in live, real time? And what back-end architecture will allow us to do that, that in itself continues to need to advance and continue to evolve? And how do we deliver personalization in real time? How do you as a retailer make it about me in a real way across a seamless shopping experience? And so retail ecosystems, vast interconnected communities of consumers, retailers, and partners are becoming the norm in the retail industry. And Ian and I will chat a little bit about, some of the work they're doing with what you might even consider competitors in certain instances to be partners. And this will be important part of the retail landscape. So we stop thinking about this agnostic channel piece. It's a back-end architecture piece. We think about this idea of retail ecosystem. So the renaissance, the rebirth of physical retail, the curated ecosystem experience. Now, of course, we're still going to be a retailer, we're still going to have the right product, the right price, the right place, the right time, and all those fundamental skills never go away. Still going to know your stock turns, your sell-throughs, and all that great stuff. But it's in the context of a changing environment. So we look at the 3 C's of seamless shopping into between now and 2030, if you like. The process of engaging people in a meaningful experience. Context. What is the setting, environment, or event in which the customer participates? And it can't, for a retailer, be the physical 300 square meters, stack it high, watch it fly, boring as batshit. It's got to be really thinking through this. What's the content? What's the data and information that supports the products, provides personalization, and delivers the business model? And how agile are we? Are we actually agile as a business? Are we agile as a culture? Are we agile in our information systems? Are we mobile? Because our customer is moving at a fast pace. And for many of us, there's a gap between that customer wishes, their information seeking, their gathering, the way they want to interact with brands, and our legacy systems. And fulfillment, the last hour, if you like, the last mile, I'm sorry. Woolworths is an example. Woolworths Group and Uber Eats partnered to make same-hour grocery delivery a reality across Australia. And there it is on the Woolworths Metro ad. And Woolworths, by the way, are a wonderful case study on emerging thinking, as is Kmart, emerging thinking behind this new customer and this new journey for retail. This is in Nuremberg, storefronts, rethinking the physical store, integrating it with this digital and environment. Simply here, physical stores will be reimagined through digital technology with the use of virtual stores, smartphone technology enabling the creation of digital experiences in the physical space, being used to create animated content when aimed at QR codes or links. This stuff will start to become hygiene factors for a lot of retailers. It just will be expected. At the moment, it's fairly new and everyone's going, it's really interesting, but it's becoming increasingly common. And not for the entire fleet, possibly for the showrooms. Supply channels. Transparency of data, the use of AI to drive supply channels. Thinking about the environment from supply channels. One of the topics around the environment is landfill. One of the reasons for landfill is because we've got inappropriate and incorrect ordering, so full transparency to supply chains. And interestingly, I saw a thing the other day with it. Right now, the cost of a container of product into Australia is 4 times higher than it was a year ago. So retailers have got to think about data, accuracy of stock, personalization, linking it to sales, and getting far more sharper in that space. And again, data is changing that. This rather complex graph is really telling us that retailers who offer a full suite of buy now, return online, purchase, click and collect, same day, and so forth, are showing greater average transaction values, greater depth with their customer relationship, and focus much more on the lifetime value and profit of a customer versus the single transaction, try and add up 10% and have a good life. So this idea of integration once again. I just want to quickly touch on something called disintermediation, which is a big word. And basically, the retail store was the gateway. It was the end gate of the path. The supplier, the producer produced the product, the supplier distributed a relationship to the retailer, and then the customer got to see it. And hopefully they saw it at a profitable rate of return. Now brands are becoming retailers, as we know, wholesalers. direct to market, online direct to market. There's a range of ways in which businesses do direct. So that B2C, B2B structure is starting to move and starting to change. So one of our takes on that is the growth of the brand, the role of the emotional attributes, the physical attributes, the promise, the growth of the village. Because consumers such as you and I can do business with any brand at any time. That was once traditionally business to business, now it's all in this retail ecosystem. Okay. Let's move through this quickly. The rise of 63% of retailers surveyed said the pandemic has led to be a moderate or sharp increase in robotics usage and warehouse and distribution. So what's it saying? It's saying the full value chain is being influenced by technology. I couldn't help but, we did a couple of future of retail podcasts recently, and one of them was this thing called the Metaverse, and this whole concept of mixed reality. So I couldn't help, with Mohit's help in our team, to talk a little bit about this. Well, in the next few years, imagine going to a food court in virtual reality, to order a pizza, bring out to shop, or play a game, or watch a movie, while you wait for your physical pizza to be made and delivered. Can I go water? Okay. The Metaverse. Facebook, or Meta as they call themselves, thank you, are pouring billions of dollars into this. And for now, we think of it as a digital ecosystem. And the purpose of the Metaverse is not to function in isolation, but to build bridges between the virtual and the real world. An emerging reality? Yes, it is. So one of the great things about the Metaverse already is you can make yourself look younger, fitter, and leaner. And a bit about designing your perfect partner. So here I am in the Metaverse. I'm bouncing into my local Kmart. All virtually done. There's my product. I'm trying it on in a real Metaverse way. I'm deciding how cool I look. I walk a bit like a monkey in this thing, but anyway, at least I've taken 15 years off my age and 15 kilos. And this is, I suppose this is a little bit like looking at the flame many, many years ago and never actually seeing that it could become electricity in time to come. This is really the very first clunky adaptation of it. It is really a gaming site adapted somewhat for retail. But it is the start. It is the start. And you'll start to see today how these two environments will start to merge. So one day you'll be at home, you'll have some sort of device probably, and you'll click on the Metaverse, and up there you'll come dancing around in virtual reality, shopping, doing whatever you do. And that product will be delivered to your home. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, circular economy. According to research by our friends at Accenture, 1 in 2 consumers are making more sustainable buying choices. It is a big deal, increasingly a big deal. And AG Insights, we've got a lot of research on this as well. And I was surprised by the move to social consciousness, and it's a great thing, and the way that people are thinking about this. This will only grow. So be transparent in your origin of goods. Talk about the way the product, think about social consciousness. Have it as a real value in your business because it's increasingly popular. And of course, retailers are starting to move into the space. Here's H&M, Rewear, Canada, there are plenty of examples. And I've touched on the role of neuroscience. We firmly believe, and for those who have worked with us and understand our work in the limbic system of the brain, this is a key area. And maybe that's a good segue, Anastasia. So thanks very much, everybody. A quick look at the future of retail.
And just quickly before we do move on a little bit to consumers, on your table you will have a bingo card. This is our predictions for the future retail trends. You don't have to do anything with it now. This is your bingo card to tick off as we go through 2022. And then you can hold us to it at the end of the year to see how accurate we have been.
Sorry, so stick it on your fridge door and then give us a mark at the end of the year, okay?
We're putting it out there what we think is going to happen in the next 12 months.
Do you want me to be your clicker?
It's all right. It started working.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
So I'll just go
Welcome,
very
Anastasia.
quickly. So firstly, let's have a think about the day in the life of the current consumer. Now, when I first presented this slide about 5 years ago, this sounded pie in the sky. But when we look at it now, you can make plans to try virtually new looks, which Brian's just showed us, at your local store with friends. So you can actually do it with your friends virtually. Whip together a party in minutes, have the items sent to you by drone. So if anyone's been watching the news, KFC have started drone deliveries this week. So again, this is now active, and you can get that coveted birthday gift that you've forgotten about at the last minute in 2 clicks. So we've really seen how the customer interacts with retail really change. So I said, I first presented this, I think in about 2017, and everyone was like, that'll never happen. And if we look back now, we can tick everything off on that list. So I think it's that forward thinking, what's going to take off, how a customer is going to adapt. So I'm going to really quickly talk on a few trends that we're seeing in our customer research. So for anyone that doesn't know, at Retail Doctor Group, we have an insights division. Twice a year, we do customer research to understand what are customers doing, what's happening in the market. And we also do that for our clients as well. So what have we seen? Firstly, time is a currency. Coming out of the pandemic, customers now value their time a lot more. So what we're seeing is that they want to spend their time well. So this time well spent. Does a retailer give me a reason to use my time? Or can they save me time? So if you can save them time, they're willing to pay more. And this was a great example from IKEA of how they've used time as a currency. So I think this is really quite exciting that they're letting customers now pay for IKEA products using their time. So everybody knows that to go to IKEA, it takes a good hour to get there. It's a long way, it's on the outskirts of the city. So now you can use the time that you traveled to actually pay for the items in IKEA by using your Google Maps, showing that this is the route that you took. So this person traveled nearly 2 hours. What does that equal? And obviously this was used, I guess, as a promotion for IKEA, but it's a great example of thinking about how can we use time as a currency and how are customers thinking about that? The time that I use with a retailer, how else could I have spent it? So everything in the store has got a price of time, which is really quite clever. I won't play the whole video, it's a few minutes, we'll move on. But what we see in our research is that 3/4 of millennial customers want a retailer to save them time. So they really are looking for what can you do to make their lives easier, to make it quicker. So some of the things that we've really seen that are all quite normal now, subscriptions, pre-ordering, mobile payments, click and collect, virtual payments to make it easier. But from a retailer's perspective, thinking about that customer's interaction with you, is it as easy as possible? And if not, do customers get value from it? Is it worth spending their time? And one of the things that we talk about a lot is the different customer types. So if we dig into this neuroscience and look into these personalities, what you'll actually find is different personality types have a different interest when it comes to interacting with retailers. So our hedonists and adventurers are much more interested in using click and collect, unless there's a really big experience in it for them. Our younger customers, 1 in 5, actually have a subscription to a beauty product or a toiletry product. I mean, I'd like to say who's got the who gives a crap toilet paper. I mean, there we go, in the sample of this room, we've already got 1 in 5. So it's really taking over. So thinking from your brand, what can you do to adapt to this customer trend? This was a great example from Zara, how they can save time. So you can identify if the product that you want is in your local store to pick up within 30 minutes. So for anyone that's like me that forgets to buy an outfit until the last minute, you know that it's there and you can get it immediately. So how can you save it time, make it easier for me? So trend 2, retail as an activity. So retail, I can't even say this, retail attainment. One of the things that really is, now the pandemic's coming to an end, hopefully, is that customers are looking for ways to spend their time. How can they spend their time? How can they enjoy it? So retail will become more of an activity. So we'll find that the gap between experiential retail and transactional retail will get even wider. So make it an experience. I mean, I would actually like to use Kmart. that's an experience. I go to Kmart, I plan 2 hours because I'm going to look at everything in the store. It is an entertainment factor. It's a day out. And we will see this, customers looking for that more. So as a retailer, where do you sit? And what level of entertainment are customers looking for? So I touched on this probably 12 months ago, the term shoptimism. So if anyone hasn't heard of that yet, buying small value products to make yourself feel better, shoptimism. So again, in particular, at the end of the pandemic, customers are looking for retail to give them feelings, to make them feel better, looking for that experience. And then as well, we don't have to just have it in the physical store. So we're seeing the rise of augmented reality and virtual reality with retail. So we've seen that 63% of consumers are interested in using augmented reality in retail. So that's when you go online. I had a great chat with Snapchat a few months back, and you can try on products using the filters in the Snapchat app. So it's again, how do we create that experience in the virtual environment? Trend 3 is loyalty. So this is something we've seen a lot in all of the research that we've done. Loyalty schemes used to be quite not of interest to especially the younger consumers. And in the last 2 years, we've seen that loyalty has increased and increased. And what we're now seeing is that our consumers want to be loyal to retailers. They're looking for the retailer to then give back to them. And it's not purely about collecting points anymore. So anyone that we've worked with in the last 12 months will have noticed that their customers are getting more loyal, but they're also getting more demanding. We can see that 3/4 of customers that actually use loyalty schemes say that it influences their behavior. So again, this backs up that use of a loyalty scheme. We can see 38% actually say they visit more often, and 29%, or 1 in 3, say they spend more because of that loyalty scheme. So they spend more with that retailer. But it's not as simple anymore as just collecting points to redeem vouchers. So we've got to think about who is our customer and what style of loyalty scheme is really going to appeal to them. And when we look into that, we can see different personalities are looking for different things. So whether it's status tiers, so VIP special products, early access to events, or whether it's gamification. They're looking for a loyalty scheme that plays games that makes it interesting for them. Are they looking for the loyalty scheme that gives them access to special products, to be the first person? And each customer's got a very different driver, depending on their emotional and their personality type. So trend 4, pre-research. I'm not telling you anything new here. Pre-research is there. We know that over 80% of consumers now pre-research before they purchase anything. Here we go, 88%. 86% of 24 to 34-year-olds actually use social media to pre-research. So as a retailer, not just are you on social media, but are you on the right social media and using the right messaging? So again, what I talk a lot about is different customers look for different messaging. So they might be looking for entertainment on social media, or if you've got a disciplined customer, they're looking for information on social media. So having the right tone on the right channel is so important now. It can't be a one-size-fits-all social media. And 63% say they start their buying journey on a search engine. So again, have a look at your post-purchase journey and how does that search engine interact with what you're doing right now. But what is really important that I want to showcase here is we've got 3 different personality types. So a performer, a hedonist, and a harmonizer. Now these 3 personalities, so this is using neuroscientific personality profiling, have got very different drivers. And because of those drivers, they've got a different purchase journey. So our performer, get to the point, make it quick, make it easy, very much in the digital space. So they'll pre-research online. They want quick and prompt service. They probably want not to speak to anybody in store. They want to get in, they want to get out. And post-purchase, they're looking for VIP, loyalty. They really want that status. Whereas if we look at our hedonist is about fun, it's about excitement. So in their journey, they're looking for things that interests them, to keep them interested. Fun products, new products, exciting products. And you can see throughout their journey, they want that interaction. Whereas when we look at our harmonizer, so our harmonizer is our largest consumer segment in Australia, around 30% of the market. Our harmonizer is looking very different. They're looking for social proof. They're looking for friends. They're looking for family. What they want to do is to know that they are safe, They can rely on that retailer. They've got warranties, they've got safety, security. So they're looking for a very different interaction with that retailer at every point of that journey. So it's really important to understand who is that end customer. Just very quickly, 2 more trends. Digital enabling. So again, this is one that we already know. 1 in 3 customers want digital screens in store to check products. 17% influenced by augmented reality. So again, if we took a step back, probably 2 years, that would have been 0. So we really had seen the rise and rise. Last year, you could purchase a car through augmented reality. So you could sit in the car, you could try it out, you could take it on a test drive without getting off your couch. So we really are seeing that come into retail. We're seeing magic mirrors, if anyone's seen them in store now, and interactive mirrors to find the products. So customers are really starting to get more demanding about how they interact. So I've touched on social media. 86% of purchasing choices are influenced by their friends' posts on social media. So if we just take a second, 86% is influenced by social media. So really having that right social media strategy, and like I said, the right tone of voice, the right content at each touch point. And finally, brand ethics. So we know this is there. This kind of was a trend that we found it went silent through 2020. It became less of a priority for customers. And then towards the end of 2021, it's come back kicking and screaming. So customers really are interested. There's a lot of hygiene factors. So we say brand ethics, but there's a hygiene factor. As a brand, do you have an ethical policy? Do you have values that your customer can relate to? Not just values that are there that we don't really talk to. So I think what we've seen come back is that customers want brands they connect to. And again, from the different personalities, they're looking for different things. So Olivia, our open-minded personality, she's interested in what's happening in her local community and how her retailers are supporting her local community. She's also very much interested plant-based, animal rights. So she has got a very different driver for ethics as we see Hannah. So Hannah the hedonist, she's quite self-centered in her ethical beliefs. She actually wants to support something ethical because of the good feeling that she gets. So she has a very different driver. Whereas when we go to our adventurer, he's looking very much more of the activism brands. So he wants to see brands that are actually making a change. He wants to see brands that are doing something. So again, that's just 3 different customers, but very different drivers on ethics. So I think my purpose today is just to understand different customers, whether they're 18 or 80, have got these personality traits, these emotions, and how we can drive them. Sorry, I did lie, there's one more. The rise and rise of local. I don't tell anyone in the room, Australian made local products, so important. We saw this through the pandemic through lack of choice, but now we're seeing that customers are choosing. So 1 in 3 are willing to pay more for Australian made. So that's such a large start. 1 in 3 are saying, yeah, I want to support local. I want to support my local retailers. So as a business, what does this mean for you? How are you local? Fantastic. So I'm going to pass back to Brian and we're going to welcome Ian.
Should we do it? Thanks, sir. Well done, Anastasia. That was great. Well, I'm delighted to, for those who haven't met Ian, introduce you to Ian Bailey, Managing Director of Kmart Australia. And Ian has been gracious enough to agree to spend some time here at our fireside chat. Less the fire, but anyway, we're getting there. Ian, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you in person. So thank you very much to all of you that have turned up in the room. Great to see some live faces.
And the journey at Kmart has been a transformative journey. If I think from when it first opened in Australia in 1969 to now 323 shops across Australia and New Zealand and a strong online business and so forth. A journey that's also been mirrored in the growth of department stores generally and growth of shopping centres and so forth. When you look back at the last 2 or 3 years, what are some of the influences in Australian retail you think that have influenced yours and your team's thinking? There's been pressure on rents, pressure on overheads, changing consumer.
Yeah, I guess in the last 2 years, clearly we've been dominated by COVID and the implications of that, as we've all experienced. But even before then, we were looking at customers really accelerating their expectations at an incredible rate. And our feeling was we were failing to Now, we were fortunate in the Kmart business that we were still doing better than our competition.
Yes.
So on a relative basis, maybe we were a little ahead, but on an absolute position, we felt we were too far. And there were too many things going on in their lives, which were not necessarily our sort of retail, but things going on in their lives they were suddenly getting used to. So of course, Uber's been around now for quite some time. And we're all so used to knowing exactly where our car is and how far away it is and how long it's going to take and what the rating of the driver is and all that other information that comes along for the ride. And yet we can't tell a customer what products are in our store. You know, which seems so basic when you do that comparison. Now we know all the reasons why that's difficult from an operational perspective. And I'm sure many retailers in the room understand those same issues as well. But from a customer viewpoint, it doesn't matter. From a customer viewpoint, that's information I would expect to have.
Because it's a bit difficult to hear.
Okay. Well, loud. Sorry. Hello. Okay. Whilst being undertaken, it's true of a broader Australian retail environment, isn't it? That consumers moving more quickly to the point you make. And this idea of transformation, which you said to me one day, I thought was really interesting, that incremental change is challenging for any leader, but COVID forced the hand, as it were.
Yeah, it was a common theme. I think every business thought they were unique at the start of COVID, that we seemed to be able to accelerate our speed of change. And then of course you speak to other people and you realize everybody seemed to crack that code in that one moment. And so then it goes, so what was unique about that moment enabled us to move at a speed and deliver solutions more quickly than we'd probably ever done before. And of course it was clarity. And, you know, think about change, and this has been around forever, right? What do you need to get an effective change project? You need people to really get why you're changing and what needs to happen. COVID gave us clarity.
Yeah.
You know, we had stores which didn't know how to create a safe environment during the pandemic. We had to figure that out really quickly. We didn't need to explain it to the teams why this and why we should prioritize this over something else. So we had clarity. And I think through that we got, you know, incredibly fast execution. And I would say across the entire retail spectrum, we saw that. We saw sticky tape on floors, if you remember, you know, right at the day to mark out crosses. And, you know, some people did circles, some people did crosses. They became decals, of course, over time as we became more sophisticated. And then we started putting up, you know, the most basic of barriers within store to try and create lanes, and then became more sophisticated in all of those elements. But it was clarity. So I think one of the challenges we have, of course, as time passes, is how do we retain that clarity? Because things have normalized. You know, we're 2 years in. I mean, who would have thought we'd have been saying that 2 years ago? We're 2 years in, still not quite knowing when the end's in sight. And so, yeah, keeping that clarity about what's really important as we continue on this journey is probably the challenge now, where at the start it was actually something we were gifted.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And when I think about the business of Kmart, and like many of its contemporaries, this idea of growing physical stores for scale. But of course, I think what I understand is that one of your key projects is around digitalization. I love this focus being a customer-led, digitally enabled retailer. I think, well, great, and that's so important. How do you reconcile that to the need to grow physical space? You know, how does that all happen for a customer business model?
Yeah, it's, you know, when you look at growth models, the opening a new store is a pretty easy to grasp growth model, right? 10 stores, I open another one, I've got 11. Assuming it's a half decent store, you've grown by 10%, right? So and of course that's been the retail model for many years. Keep opening stores, grow sales, fractionalize your cost base, make more money. Yeah. That's pretty much the model.
Keep the landlord away.
Well, you try and do your best to manage your costs wherever they are, whether they're through your partners or your landlords, or whether they're through your own costs yourselves. On the way through, I think now, of course, there's a risk you can have too many stores. And so we've got businesses which are still increasing their numbers because they don't feel they have enough, and others which are reducing. But what we're all trying to do is figure out what's the right number.
Yeah, what's the right size?
Correct. And that then fits into, you know, some of the things which you were talking about at the start of this presentation around, well, where does your brand, where does your business sit in this customer journey, and what role does it play in their lives, and therefore what's important. Now, for Kmart, we're a very high volume retailer. We sell over 1 billion items a year. And proximity to customers at the price points we at really helps. So we are a high density physical footprint retailer. But I can assure you, we look at the maths of every one of those stores through an incredibly rigorous lens. We're very focused around the long-term potential of each one of those stores. We analyze the data to death on exactly who's shopping and what's happening to those shopping behaviours, so that we can get a really clear view as to what we think is going to happen with each one of those stores in the long run. Because one thing we all know is if you have stores which make life very easy, you have a tail of the fleet which becomes an incredible drag. And so you always looking to act on that tail well before it becomes a problem.
And have you experienced in the last few years landlords working with you in terms of that tail and sort of more of those partnerships out there?
It varies enormously. There's so many retailers, there's so many landlords, and clearly some would be easier to try and figure out the future than others. Our particular view is that rents need to go down as well as up on the way through, and we've been working with our landlords to create agreements where that occurs. Now we know landlords need certainty, right? They need certainty of future revenue so that they can get their valuations and their economics work. So we've been working with them to try and find solutions. The best of both worlds. We get the valuations that the landlords needs to be effective, but equally, if a store goes up or down, we can pay more or less rent based upon the performance of that store. And move more to a variable cost model than a fixed or a ratcheting up cost model.
It's an interesting comment about the last few years have been about trying to make certainty out of uncertainty for everyone. And if I think about the size of your shops and your fleet, and yet we're talking and you're talking and leading a team through a digital transformation as well. And it's the reconciling, isn't it, I guess, of as people start to use us in a, dare I say it, retail ecosystem way. And I think you've always been great in social media, and that's been a real piece of it. Will they visit the physical store as much? Does the physical store need to be as big? These are all questions I guess you've got on the table.
Yeah, I think if I take a step back and talk about this, the customer-led digital piece, again, we've looked at how the world's played out. And you look at the best retailers over time, and they have an incredible emotional connection, with their customers. And every one of us within this room and online would have a business which they associate with or a brand they associate with because they feel a connection. They feel it reflects who they are, or it says something about who they are, and you would choose that business over others, all other things being equal. And then you've got the digital world, who has this, this customer obsession, is the language that gets used many times, and it's this ruthless logic and the simplification of transactions to try and make it easier and simpler and faster and quicker. And so, in one side, you've almost got like excuse this dodgy analogy, but sort of got Captain Kirk, right, showing my age here, the emotional character, and then you've got Spock on the other side with the ruthless logic.
Yeah.
I think the future is you've got to have both. Yeah. And so for us, we started more on the, on the human side of retail, if I like. We've got to bring those digital elements in, because, having a great relationship with our customers, but being hard work to deal with, sooner or later will become problematic, and it will mean we lose some of those people that really want to shop with us.
Yeah. I touched earlier on this legacy networks versus unified connection, the architecture of the business information systems. And one of the things that I thought was fascinating was, as you lead through that journey, I think Amazon Web Services, if I recall, are one of your partners.
Yep.
And some might have looked at that historically and said, well, that's interesting because they're, in a narrow sense, a competitor. But it changes this partnership model, doesn't it, the retail ecosystem thinking?
Yeah, it does. You've got to try and figure out how do you create really great offers for customers in a way that makes the most sense. Now, there are other partners clearly than AWS that you can partner with for your cloud computing. We chose AWS for a whole host of reasons. But I think the days of being a fortress business, we came up and we're going to do everything our own way and keep everybody else out. It's just long gone. Some of your descriptions earlier around social commerce and the way that customers move through their interactions around their purchasing processes means that they're not going to start and finish with, a Kmart store or kmart.com.au. Hopefully they find their way to us at some point in that journey. And we're constantly got to figure out, well, how do we be really relevant in that journey, and how do we appear at the right times so that we can really be there when they're looking for us.
And two of the pieces to that, of course, are agility and speed. And I guess they're words, but what does that mean in terms of thinking around digital where your customer is, short fulfillment cycles and so forth.
Yeah, obviously you've got the tech stack's really, really important. And if you're a brand new company, you can create a brand new tech stack. It's a statement of the obvious. There are many digital businesses out there that have legacy tech stacks. So it's not the domain of a
Physical based retail.
Yeah, a retailer that's been around since 1969. But we've just got some really big old ones. So when you've got big old mainframe systems and it's spaghetti code, then it's not so easy to unpack in quite the same way that more modern code would be created. So we've been doing what most people do. We've been rebuilding our tech stack, and you start with the simple stuff for greatest value, common sense, and then sooner or later you start bumping into the core, and then you've got to try and find increasingly intelligent ways to slice away at that core legacy environment so that you move over time to something that is more current. I think the trick for that is, I was speaking with one of the auditors beforehand. You can spend a lot of money on the core and get no value, but it sets you up for the future. And this is sort of like the tap you tap your head and rub your tummy. You sort of got to figure out, how do I extract value on the journey? And so the sequencing of how you attack that tech stack is actually, I think, where the real value lies. And having really strong technical teams who can navigate that architecture and can figure out that journey and how it delivers value on the way, how we can deliver better customer outcomes is really important.
I guess one of the challenges for any private or public company, what have you, is the respective shareholders and boards and so forth, because the business can be obvious in the first 12, 24 months, but it is that long-term brand play, isn't it? And obtaining confidence from all forms of shareholders, employees. Through COVID, I mean, lots of webinars and events and communication, I suppose.
Yeah, we're going to do it 3 different ways. So I think if I look at change, certainly I've used Kmart as the example. Where we started functionally, if I go back in time. So if you've got a supply chain, and of course the same with the merchandise teams, your store operations teams, your digital teams, and so on. But of course, sooner or later, you start getting to the point of diminishing returns with functional improvement, and you've got to improve across functions. And we struggled with that, if I'm honest. So we had numerous tried to get out of it. We went down a path for a while of using lean as a methodology. We got a lot of value out of lean, and it was the pathway towards standardization. And if I use our stores as the example, we had stores running sort of similarly, but not the same. And so, of course, every time the leader changed in the store, the processes sort of changed in the store, and you lost any productivity that you had. If somebody figured something out in one of our stores, getting that benefit in another store was difficult because there wasn't a common process. So we standardized, and we extracted a lot of value through standardization. And so we did a whole refurbishment of our fleet. So the current format we've got, I think, in every one except 8 stores now. So the same format, same locations. We can run things like planograms. We can run standardized store processes each day. The problem is not one of those stores is optimized because it's a standard that's an average of an average of an average. And I think this is where we're heading to next, is like we want to sort of like standardized, personalized.
Yes.
Now, I know we're very familiar for that from a customer perspective, but it's true internally as well. How can we tailor our processes within each store based upon the circumstances of that store? And how do we use the technology to drive that so that we can execute that in a way that's not dependent upon the preferences of 1 or 2 individuals on the way through?
So at one level, we've got this standardization, this consistency of branded delivery through all the processes. But almost paradoxically, we've got a unique proposition for each microenvironment, and how that gets enabled, I guess, is that fair to say?
It is, and that's where so the last part of this little story is that's where we brought in Agile to look at this cross-functional piece. And we've been putting a lot of energy into that over the last 3 years, and we're seeing some really good benefits for us to be able to innovate across functions. So we're not going to Agile as an entire organization. We still think there's a lot of value in just executing really well through teams. But when it comes to innovating cross-functionally, we're finding we're getting great value from that. And that's how we're now trying to break through to that next level of that personalized and using data and technology to a much greater extent than we ever would have done in the past.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I guess that has an influence on these and the type of roles you bring into the organization. The classic retailer basic functions, and the cardinals were all in church, but now they're new skill sets, aren't they? New ways of approaching problems and opportunities, for that matter.
It's true, but not everyone's working in cross-functional,
Yeah.
transformational innovation.
That's right. Some people are just doing the doing.
There's a lot of people that do a really good job every day and they're doing fundamentally the same thing, right? They're out there, they're getting the product from the back to the front. It's really important.
Yeah.
They're serving customers to the best of their ability, really important.
Yeah.
They're still creating product ranges to the best of their ability, really important.
Yeah.
So I think there's this real blend.
Absolutely.
Of the old and the new that's important. So we're never going to be a 100% digital business. So that's not our nature, but we do have to extract the best of that into our world, so that we can be really competent in that space, if not a leader.
Thank you. One thing I needed to do, and I apologize, was that when I start to conclude some questions, if you're okay, and we'll invite questions of the audience. That's okay?
Yeah, of course.
Fantastic. Let me take us out of Kmart for a moment and a bit of a look at bird's eye of Australian retail and retail globally. And what are you seeing as some of the sort of the high level trends out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's I think the first one is a bit of a surprise. I think when we entered COVID, we anticipated there would be a bit of a shakeout of retail, and in fact there's been a real boom at different times. So our businesses have been, we call it in the middle. So we haven't necessarily been one of the businesses or the categories that's really taken off. We haven't been one of the categories that's been really, smashed through the process. We've been in the middle. But you would say on average, it's been an incredibly positive time for retail. When you look at the profit results that have been generated.
Yeah, and particularly in those, again, home-based type categories, naturally enough.
So I think the big question is what happens next. Because we've had this very unusual period of 2 years where even look now at our customers behaving, they're still spending at levels which are really unusual. They're spending on products which are more expensive than usual. I don't think I've ever experienced a time in retail where customers have been willing to pay more than they have in the last 2 years. And there'll be many retailers who have seen average sale prices increase significantly. The ability to sell at full price has increased significantly, and margins have expanded through that period. That will normalize. So there will be this reversion to normality, and of course that'll mean real competition again. And that's going to be the question of who's really evolved in this last 2 or 3 years, and who has really invested some of that money to create the businesses of the future, so that they can be the next round of winners. So we put a lot of energy into our strategic programs in the last 2 or 3 years. When COVID began, we said there were sort of three things we wanted to do as a business, and we sort of made this the mantra through the organization. One was be there for customers, and that was the whole question of be open, right? Because there was almost a debate, should you open stores or not, if you go back 2 years, if you remember. So we said, we'll be open if we can, if the rules allow us. The second one was, let's do everything we possibly can to keep team members and customers safe. So we basically took any budget constraints away, put all of the resources that we could to achieve that outcome. And the third one was, let's keep and actually accelerate our strategic agenda. Because whatever happens in this period of the pandemic, it's going to be a bumpy ride. But what we know is clear air will appear when we come out the other end. And if we're fit and healthy and we're ready for the new world, then we're going to put ourselves in a really strong position.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, because we've also seen difficulty reported for some retailers, their ability to plan ahead, as you say, their ability to preserve cash when they need it to. And I just wonder, in this next 2 or 3 years, to your point, that the core sort of elements of surviving and growing will obviously be all the things we've talked about, but there'll still be a requirement to keep investing in R&D, capital, and building this model out. And I guess Kmart are no strangers to that.
Yeah, I agree. We've been fortunate. We've had a window into the future. So we knew online was going to accelerate. We knew customers' behaviour as to how they research products, how they engage in their shopping journeys was going to evolve. It's just happened at a ridiculous rate. Forcing retail stores to shut and getting customers to go online gives you that data. We've processed online volumes that were probably 3 or 4 years out in our estimations, with operational processes and systems that weren't fit for those volumes. I'm sure that's not unusual for most of us. But what it's given us, though, we now know what it's like.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier. Go back to that question about how do you get people lined up to make change. If you know what you've got to do, it's relatively straightforward to get teams aligned. We now know what we've got to do, and our teams are very aligned on building the capabilities that we need to be able to service those volumes as an ongoing activity.
It's interesting. I walked into one of your stores close locally to mine, and it was very well presented retail. But what I also got was this real sense, I'm going to use the word omni-channel. I got a real sense of all those value-added services, click and collect, and so forth. That's been a focus, I presume, of this sort of integration topic that we've talked about.
Yeah, it is. And it's the move away of thinking about transaction economics.
Okay.
Yeah. So you think
expand on that a bit?
So transaction economics is, do I make money from this transaction? Yeah. And of course, that's what retail businesses are generally. More transactions which you make money from equals good business. And then, of course, we're up against digital players when they enter the market. They're not thinking about transaction economics. They're thinking about customer lifetime value. Yeah, because you've got to go and acquire customers, and it makes sense to acquire them and lose money on a transaction if you've got a flow of future transactions. So therefore, you start looking at this through customer lifetime value. And so we started thinking about this question, and we've been thinking about it for a number of years. It really crystallized through the pandemic. Is, what we need for a business is customers. I know it's a statement of the obvious. And what's the battleground going to be in the years to come? It's going to be traffic. We're fortunate or unfortunate, I'll let you choose. We have very high conversion rates in our retail stores. When people visit Kmart, they're coming to buy something, so they generally do. So our opportunity is generally not conversion, because it's already really high. Our opportunity is getting more people to turn up. Now, it doesn't matter if that's a physical store or that's a digital store. And so the challenge for us in the future is keeping visitation high.
Yeah.
And so therefore now we moved away from transaction economics to, we've got to keep the transaction count up, and we've got to do everything we can to encourage that. And then we've got to figure out how to make the maths work.
Yeah.
So we've gone right away from thinking about which is the more profitable channel, which one do we want customers to shop into, to we just want customers to shop as frequently as they possibly can.
And to return.
And we will figure out how to make money.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about these, as you say, these tech startups, it's all about the raise of capital. It's all about achieving and acquiring customers against the burn rate. And that's the funding model. But of course, for your good selves and all retailers, well, how do I drive past that transactional view to a much more ecosystem view?
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
Because our businesses are programmed, I won't say ours, mine, is programmed on transaction economics. So to try having conversations around customer lifetime value to somebody that just said, yeah, but I just lost money on that transaction and you want me to do another one.
Yeah.
Is, it takes a lot of work and a lot of leadership from my entire team to take the business on that journey.
And courage too, because the easier path back is to be what we've always been. But what you're saying is we can't really be what we've always been. We have to evolve. Statement of the obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a wonderful time with I've been at Kmart 16 years now, and it's been an incredible business to be a part of. When I started, it wasn't a great business. It was a business that was pretty much going to be closed down. Clearly, we've been very successful from that period, but none of us underestimate how difficult it is to stay where we are. And one thing's for sure, if we just replicate next year what we did this year, it's not enough. Because the market in the categories that we compete against, they're clearly looking at us to say, we want some of your market share.
Yeah.
And they're figuring out our weak points, and they're gonna prosecute on those weak points rather than they're gonna focus on. So we know this is a constant race of improvement, and the only way we can stay at the top is to improve at a faster rate than our competitors. And so that's why you have to face into some of these questions. And I think the first thing is facing into the question. The second thing is coming up with a solution. Yeah. Sometimes we can get it the wrong way around, and we can say, this is too difficult, I'll leave it, I won't tackle it. And that can be really dangerous if you're in a position that we're in. Sometimes,
not about Kmart at all, but sometimes I think that, the classic sort of bastions of measurement, risk, governance, control, almost fly in the face of an innovative, progressive, risk-taking culture, and that's always a bit of a challenge, I guess.
It is. It is. Unfortunate, we're part of West Plumbers, and it always takes a long term view.
Yeah.
We still have to manage the market. We still have, half yearly profit announcements. I've got one coming up next week.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. And of course, so we do have to balance the near term with the medium and the long term. But I'm very fortunate to have a parent who's focused on long term value. And so when we have these conversations, they're always very supportive and interested in how they can help.
Yeah, that's very true. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask for any questions, if I may. Wow. Okay. Anastasia, could you feel free to grab? Thank you very much.
Ian, when you're talking about clarity before, if you could share with us, if you go back 2 years, what's something that came out dead in the water, never doing again, or even what's something in the 2 years that you didn't have 2 years ago and it's here to stay for the next little bit anyway?
Oh gosh.
Either or, I suppose.
Yeah, thinking evolves so fast, doesn't it? It's amazing when you do stuff and you suddenly realize actually we've got to adapt to this. So let's take online picking, as a really good example. We've been put under such pressure picking from store over the last period of time, and one of the pieces of clarity that we've had is when you have excess capacity in a system, using that capacity for something, even if it's not that efficient, is still really economically viable. Right? So picking from stores is great when you've got capacity in stores already, because effectively you've got free space. To a degree, you've got, if your labour is not 100% productive, you've got free labour and so on. And I think what we figured out as we've gone through this journey is, we're going to have a hybrid going forward. Picking from stores is really great for speed. So we've played around with pick from store, deliver to customer with the Uber-like delivery systems, and it's an incredibly good customer experience. Not necessarily going to be for everybody for a whole host of reasons. But equally, the challenge with stores is you don't know exactly what you got in a store. And even if you do, customers are shopping frequently. And so you're selling through and you have to start putting some sort of algorithm over the top of your online site to figure out what your availability is so the customer can place an order and you've got a chance of picking it. So I'm going into a lot of detail. I'll come back out again. So at some point, we know we need a central facility to be able to pick stock and deliver it to customers. We did not think about that 2 years ago. But that would be an example of, when you deal with the volumes that we've dealt with during periods of store closures, those sort of things become transparent to us.
Next question.
I think this gentleman here.
Thanks. Mine was on the clarity as well. I know, I think it's well articulated what drove it. At the start of COVID, I found there was the clarity and the urgency, things that would take a year to 2 months or a month. How have you kept that going? Because what I've noticed is that started to wean off, and the things that used to take out a year now taking a year again. How have you kept that clarity and drive going to transform quickly?
It's difficult. I agree with you. I think the inertia is slowing down. We've replaced what we used to do with other things. So I'm sure a lot of us used to travel a lot. I used to be on an airplane most weeks. We've got a big organization in Asia, so I'd normally go to Asia at least once a quarter, probably more than that. And then of course I'd be around Australia and New Zealand with stores and distribution centers. All that stopped, and you fill it up with video calls. And I can tell you what slows down companies: lots and lots of video calls, and saps your life force and all sorts of other issues that comes along for the ride. And now, of course, we're desperately trying to cull the number of video calls within our system, and we're starting to get in this horror called the hybrid meeting, which I'm sure we've all experienced, where you've got some online and some in a building. Like, what a mess! That can't last, we don't think, for too long. Where am I going with this? It's been difficult. And I think also what we're seeing over time is, 2 years is a hell of a long time for teams not to be together on a consistent basis. Our teams are based in Melbourne, so they've had the greatest level of, in terms of the office. So we've had the greatest level of lockdowns of pretty much anywhere. And we can see the degradation of the effectiveness of our culture as time's passed. And I think it would be fair to say for every business around, attrition rates, no matter how good they were at the beginning, are probably nudged up a bit. So we still have pretty good attrition rates relative to the market, but they're bigger than they were. And so that slows us down on the way through. So how do we try and compensate? We try and keep the strategic agenda really clean, so that we've got a small number of very important things. become more disciplined around like a quarterly review of the strategic agenda, where we really do assess progress in the last quarter, what's worked, what hasn't, what do we need to shift and adjust, what do we start, stop, continue. I think our structure on that has improved a lot. We're not there yet. So, you know, if I was to say, are we a 7 or an 8 out of 10, we're probably a 5. Before the pandemic, we were probably a 2 or a 3. So I think our ability to force focus has probably improved, which is trying to help compensate against, I think, the challenge of, you know, 2 years of people not working in the way that they normally do, which is starting to become a problem.
Great answer. Great answer. Any other questions, ladies and good. Do you want to state your name and position, sir?
Thanks, Brian. Gary Donald, and just following on from that, what's your views on work from home? I understand your company Office Works has said, yeah, it's total flexibility. I'm not sure if that's carrying through, but yeah, what do you see as the future for Kmart, and is it the future that you ideally want?
I think what I want is sort of irrelevant because I think it's going to be what our team members want, and you know, we've got to create an environment where our team members really enjoy working for us. So we've had a very strong view around culture for a long while, and we know that when we get the environment right, we get the discretionary effort of engaged team members, and that's really valuable on the way through. How do we do that in the current world? It's a constant debate. I think in a hybrid model of some at home, some in the office. I'm talking purely about the office roles here, of course. On the way through, what's the exact nature of that? I think it's going to depend on the role. So the way that we're trying to navigate that at the moment is to say, you know what, there's some things we do as a business we have to do together. And so rather than trying to figure it out on, you know what, it's 3 days in the office, it's 2 days at home, some sort of there's critical things that have got to be done in the office, and we need people there to do that, because the nature of the work is just better when we have people together. Now, if I take it to a silly extreme, you know, we have a lot of samples. Not surprising as a retail business and a product development company as much as we are retail. We sort of need people in the office to unpack the boxes and distribute the samples. They can't do that from home. It's not really going to work as shipping those boxes to people's homes to go do that. It's a stupid example, but you get what I mean. But if you're doing a range, if you've got a team of merchants and marketers, even with the best technology, trying to do a ranging discussion where you're looking at physical product, and no matter how good the Metaverse becomes, we're not there yet.
Absolutely.
And so I think for me, it's a long answer, so I'll bring it to a close.
Oh,
we need to focus on what really works together, and then what can be done individually. And there could be some roles which are 100% from home, because the nature of that role is such that it's just an individual specialist doing their thing. There could be other roles which are 5 days a week, you know, in the office, because the nature of that role requires that. So I think it's going to become tailored to the role based on what it calls.
Yeah, great answer. I think
Simon Fontaine from Leasing. How do you see rents for the DDS category playing out in the future, given that there's now only 2, and for that matter, the department store business? And what do you envisage Footprints will do over time, given, you know, that there's been a lot of take up for your sister brand? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, probably should say first up, unless there's been an announcement from one of our competitors, there's probably 3 big ones left. So because obviously I've got Target as well as Kmart as part of my portfolio. And what will happen is the landlords will maximise the returns they can get on their properties. And I think whilst we're valuable in terms of the traffic that we bring, whilst we're valuable in the tenants that will want to be outside our front door, then I think we have a negotiating position that means we can get a deal that makes commercial sense for us all the way through. The last period of time has been unusual, yeah, because the landlords have actually had a surprising number of people who want to come into the shopping malls. So it's become easier for some of the landlords to lease in the last year than it was pre-COVID. Will that continue? That's, yeah, who knows, right? But if I take the premise that we're all going to be fighting for traffic in the medium term, then I think that's probably going to be true of shopping malls as well. And so what we'll see is probably some really good shopping malls that will do really, really well because they figure it out and they've got a really good proposition for their catchments. And I think when you get to that, then the landlord's got a lot of strength. And so of course that will play out in the negotiation. And so perhaps not too dissimilar to the history, right? It's a negotiation of relative strengths of the two parties.
Yeah,
what will happen to space over time? I think there'll probably be less. Is it dramatic? I think it depends. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, what's the future of department stores? You know, one of the great joys of working in a discount department store is you get asked that question a lot. We tried changing the name, so we called ourselves Kmart Group rather than the department store group within West Farms. It didn't work. I still get asked the question. and I think, you know, the answer is it doesn't really matter. It's what matters is your proposition to your customers.
Yeah.
And we are a multi-category proposition with the number one or the number two in the vast majority of categories that we're in. And so that gives us the ability to be competitive in the market. And so that gives me confidence that as long as we remain relevant to our customers within those categories, then we can be a successful business for a long time to come on the way through. And I think it's up to the others outside of my group to try and figure out their propositions. And if they do a good job, I'm sure there's a market there for the products that they sell.
We've got time for one or two more questions.
Hi, Helen Clark from Glory Global. Just a question on, I guess, the unique shopping experience for a Kmart consumer. What was the thinking behind centralising the purchasing? And then what does that mean in the future? Because you talk about thinking forward and automation and the influence of what the pandemic's done. Just give us some insights as to, is that model going to stay? What's the future look like when it comes to the consumer and transacting?
Yeah, it's a great question. We get commentary every week on that, by the way, from our customer surveys, both good and bad, of why are the registers in the middle. And you know, which is funny, right? Because most retailers don't have the registers at the front door. I know supermarkets do, and I know discount department stores did historically, but you know, you go into department stores, they don't store embedded in the store. Most specialty stores wouldn't stick their registers at the front door. They'll stick them somewhere else. Why is that? Because the most important real estate is the front of the store. It gets the most traffic. So it was a commercial view that we want customers to shop product when they come in, not see registers. And so then we tried to structure the store in the most logical place. And then we said, okay, well, what does it make sense to put the registers? We said, well, probably in the middle, right up that central aisle. So it's still reasonably easy to exit. So that's why they do, because it's the maths of high visitation at the front of the store. What do we see in the future? We did an experiment just before COVID. We opened a few stores in the US. So we partnered with an ex-Amazon executive, and we were really trying to pilot the digital store. And one of the things we were piloting was just walkout checkout. But so I know you've got things like Amazon Go, which I'm sure you've probably seen in the US, which has got an amazing amount of technology. It feels like you wouldn't want to be in there for more than like 10 minutes before you become a barbecue chicken yourself. But there's a lot of, clearly for a store the size of Kmart, we couldn't tackle that. So we were looking at basically an automated checkout. And I think it's still going to be the future. I mean, it's, you know, think about it yourself, right? When you go shopping, you're enjoying the moment of shopping. And when you decide you want to go, you want to leave. And no matter how good that checkout experience, you know, it's just painful. And whilst we still have that, it's a piece of friction that just detracts from the experience. And it's the last experience you had before that you leave. So I think it's one that I think we'll all be trying to figure out as time passes, how do customers, when they finish their enjoyable shopping, they can just leave. But we still get paid.
Any final questions?
Thanks, Ian. Avi from Occupy. I really enjoyed that conversation. My question is more around, you mentioned you've got so many strategic priorities and that you're working with Kmart for 16 years. What aspect of your role now do you enjoy the most?
Apart from these sessions.
Yeah, apart from these breakfasts. No, it's a very good question. You know, I still like the simple things, if I'm honest. So yesterday I got the chance to go to the New South Wales Distribution Centre, and I got to speak to Noelle, who's our who's a distribution center manager. She's been there like 21 years, I think she told me yesterday. And just going out and spending time with the team and listening to their story and what they're focused on and how it's working is still a great joy. And I think about it pre-COVID, I've always enjoyed going to the factories throughout Asia and meeting the workers and the factory owners. And it's an incredible privilege in these roles to meet the variety of people that we meet. And I'd still say that's one of the most enjoyable aspects. And it's been one of the downers of COVID and video calls, you don't get that same connection. And I'm sure if I did this particular session via video and I was staring at my screen in my study, I wouldn't feel the same as I do because I can see you and experience the same moment. And it's the same when you go to stores and distribution centers and factories. It's people.
Time for one last word.
I think we will need to wrap up.
Okay. Easy. Thanks very much. Well, first of all, a warm round of applause for Ian and Valerie. It was a really good session, because you speak as a coal-faced retailer through all the emerging pieces that we talk about and leading from the front. So personally delighted that you're here. So thanks again, Ian. The coffee upstairs?
There'll be coffee, there's coffee, tea, and still some snacks at the back, so feel free to hang around and help yourselves. And also, we're in our final week for Australian Retail Innovators. So if you haven't nominated yet, whether you nominate your own business, or you can also nominate someone else in the market that's doing fantastic things. So there's quite a few different categories to choose from. If you can't find the link, feel free just to email us, we can send you a link to nominations, but it closes on the 15th. Now, the big exciting news is our next physical event will be the awards for Australian Retail Innovators. They're going to be held on April the 12th. And what's even more exciting is they're going to kick off Retail Fest. So it's Retail Week on the Gold Coast. So the awards will actually be held on the Gold Coast this year. So hopefully we'll see some of you at Retail Week. And this will be launching the week. So fantastic.
And if I can just quickly thank Anastasia and the Retail Doctor Group team, guys at the back. Thanks very much for putting this on today. We're back into the world of people. Fantastic.